The fire in Cape Town has been contained, but there are still concerns about strong winds flaring it up again. The fire has caused massive damage to property since it started on Sunday. For more on the latest, we joined on the midday view this hour by eNCA reporter Ronald Masinda. Ronald, good afternoon. What's the latest you can tell us in Cape Town regarding this fire?
Good afternoon, Pratan. You're coming to us live now from Walmer Estate. This is where residents have been urged by disaster management to evacuate this area since we have seen quite a number of trees burning, and as we can clearly see in the background, firefighters continuing to work around the clock to try and contain the blaze. We saw this tree satellite a short while ago, and a number of trees nearby also satellite. So concerns are that residents must evacuate in case the situation here escalates. Now what we do also know, Pratan, is that firefighters have been working since early yesterday trying to contain this blaze. And at the moment, the biggest problem is really gusty winds that are going at around over 30 kilometers per hour. This has been the biggest issue faced by firefighters. We also heard earlier on that several firefighters have also been admitted to hospital for burn wounds. It's been a difficult time for firefighters. Yet, Pratan, we also heard earlier on from one union member saying that firefighters are also facing the possibility of losing their jobs, even despite the valiant efforts that they are putting in to ensure that people's lives are first of all saved, and also there's not a lot of destruction to property. This is what she had to say earlier.
If you look at the pattern ever since the firefighters have been charged, they have been very dedicated in terms of their jobs. There was not even one day that they did not come out and come and deal with their work. So the issue here is not that the firefighters would have down tools or not work or not cooperate in terms of what is happening in Cape Town when it comes to fires. They have been dedicated since day one. Even the city of Cape Town waking up this morning to the applause to these firefighters for their selflessness. Like, I mean, really, one can see that these people are dedicated in terms of their work.
Now, a lot of questions about this fire, Ronald. We know that a man has been arrested, for example. While we're still waiting for the Cape Town emergency authorities this hour to give us an update, do you have any information at all about this man who's been arrested?
So what we do know at this stage, when I spoke to Safety and Security MACO member JP Smith, he says that residents are near where the fire started say that around 3 people were seen starting a fire, and that one of them, a man in his 30s, has since been arrested and is expected to appear in court soon. There are no details as to whether or not this man has previous offences or he has been in jail or not. But what we also heard is that there is a possibility that this man is a homeless man, and that this might not necessarily be a deliberate attempt to burn trees on Table Mountain. But
okay,
where we are moving on, Pratan, as you can clearly see, there's a lot of ashes, there's a lot of smoke in the background, and this is one of the concerns for firefighters who have said that, you know, one of the biggest problems with trying to contain this fire is that many people are reluctant to also try and move and evacuate because they don't want to leave their belongings.
And it's very windy. Sorry, Ronald, to cut you, and it's very windy as well. We just need to leave your live report here so we can take our viewers right now to that briefing by the Cape Town emergency offices, authorities rather, who have been battling this fire. Let's take you live there now. It just began a short while ago.
Public, thank you for all your donations and helping keeping our firefighters hydrated. Thank you.
Hand over to Charlie Powell from the Disaster Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk on the logistical management in terms of the donations that we've received. We're assisting the city's fire services in managing their donations and providing logistical support in getting those donations to the firefighters on the fire line. And that is taking these donations to the 3 forward command posts, which is the Roland Street Fire Station and also other 2 other forward command posts. And then in terms of the evacuation processes, there was a coordinated effort. Since early hours of this morning, the residents in the Vredehok and also in the Zonnebloem area decided to evacuate on their own, obviously because of precautionary measures and also of the smoky conditions. And then we also assisted with evacuation, going door to door with the disaster management volunteers. And this was also a decision made with the city's fire services, a collaboration effort. And currently we are evacuating residents in the Dyser Park area, as well as in the Zonnebloem area and Vredehok area. We've also liaised with the Department of Education, and we collaborated with them, and a decision was made to call for evacuation of all the schools in the Zonnebloem and Vredehok area. Okay?
Thank you, Charlotte. We'll take questions at the end, and we'll also do a short tour to the incident room where the operations are taking place. But for now, I'll hand over to any bottle. We've got anything input? Okay. Mayor Saito, if you could speak about the strategic buildings and what we've been experiencing.
Yeah, thank you very much and good afternoon. I'm going to concentrate first and foremost on the residents. Since yesterday and even today, what you see in here, the assistance from the residents, I think that is absolutely remarkable. I think we need to say that to them, that when there's a call for Cape Town's residents to step up to the plate, to assist, to do something, they're doing it from the bottom of their heart. All the water, all the cool drink, all the food, and the councillors down here in this room can testify to that, and also our officials, and I'm glad to see two, three councillors with us today. And at the end of the day, when I toured the precinct around UCT and surrounding areas, residents was all over the show to assist, to help to stop the fire, to play their part, that sort of thing. I cannot come and sit here in a press conference and just talking about stopping the fire, etc., not referring to the role played by our residents. When I visited UCT yesterday, it was just flames. It was a heartbroken visit to UCT to see that internationally renowned library being gutted down. This morning, when I visited UCT again, and I spent some hours again touring the precinct, walking into the library, walking into the other buildings that was on fire, and just to assess the damage again, it was another heartbroken kind of a moment. You could see this morning personnel, senior personnel, just crying, disbelief of what is happening, can't believe what is unfolding around them. And it given me the opportunity to talk to many of them, to tour into the building with them. They had to unload, they had to see the inner side of the library, the inner side of some of the other buildings gutted down. And again, also to thank them, the UCT management, for their support. I called this morning on their maintenance teams to come and stop water pipes that is still running, water still flowing and that sort of thing, causing damage to the floors. And within minutes, it was about 15 to 20 of the maintenance teams on scene to come and do what they needed to do. Currently, my information I receive and listening to the two ladies, I want to thank them as well for their role they have played in keeping Cape Town's people informed. One follow the news media and that sort of thing. The fire is largely contained, still smouldering on certain patches. And after this press conference, I will go on my second tour for the day, again to the UCT, again to the precinct around the campus, just to get another kind of an idea with regard to my own assessment, my tour with Vince Botto and so on, the acting executive director, just to get another kind of a check of what is happening in Cape Town. I am not going to say much about the fire service. I think our firemen and firewomen was excellent yesterday, whole day long. Even today, many of the firemen, firewomen did not go home. They stay on job. They diligently do what we expect from them to do, to stay at the post and to fight the fires for the benefit of the public of Cape Town. And I want to take my hat off for our firemen and firewomen. They have done so far a brilliant job with the assistance of law enforcement, Metro Police, the assistance of our disaster management team, also the assistance of our traffic police, other safety officers, our volunteers. It was a massive, united front we have seen since yesterday in Cape Town, even today. All services playing their part, even South African police services. I can add to that. And then one can add the ordinary residents, people not at work. When I stop Phillips Lusana Drive, you could see residents, even if it was with buckets of water. It was a dramatic scene to see how the public of Cape Town could become resilient, how the public of Cape Town could become united, standing together, fight for a cause. And I can just take my hat off for the people of Cape Town at large, but also for our security services, putting their lives on the line to stop this dramatic fire, one of the biggest currently in the history of the city of Cape Town. I am not going to speak on other issues with regard to those arrested and so on. I'm going to leave that for Councillor Alderman J.P. Smith. He can talk about those issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll now hand over to Alderman J.P. Smith, who will speak about the arrests we made and some other operational matters. Alderman.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. I think that one thing that Arlene didn't mention that's worthwhile saying is that when you have incidents like that, everybody focuses on the damage, but you don't necessarily focus on what didn't go wrong. There are crises that were averted because of effective intervention. One of those yesterday was the preemptive actions taken to prevent the fuel supplies at those science labs at UCT from becoming part of the incident. Quick action by the university there in conjunction with the fire department to remove some of those fuel stores from site, bleed off the oxygen supplies and other stuff. Those could, had situation been slightly different, ended up as part of a much greater disaster. Also, I want to commend them for getting the eyes and the helicopters up really early this morning, yesterday morning already. The first thing that happened is that they got the helicopters airborne. So that was very good, and it's extremely sad today that we can't get those choppers up because they're an incredibly valuable tool. If the wind abates, that might be possible, but unfortunately the weather forecast doesn't suggest that that will be possible until late afternoon. In the meantime, the fire staff will have to be out there on foot without that benefit. There have been quite a lot of interest in the arrests, and I think the thing that needs to be said is that last night, and I forget the exact time that happened, it was around 8 o'clock or so. I think more or less just after dark, about 9 o'clock, we suddenly started getting a flood of calls from people. In fact, a person in this room who relayed one of those calls to me, from journalists, law enforcement, neighbourhood watch members, councillors, who all suddenly said, quick, the community is seeing 3 people walking through the bush with fires starting as they're going. I said, are you sure about this? Are you sure it's not just the fire spotting, more embers landing and starting fires, or the wind blowing some of these still smouldering tree trunks and other stuff back into a fire? They said, no, we can definitely see people moving and starting fires. So we did request the locally available traffic law enforcement, Metro Police, to move to the site to see if we could find these individuals and stop them. And when one of the law enforcement officers arrived on the edge of Vredehuk, a member of the public engaged him, Yazid Evans, and said that there was a man at a fire right there. The law enforcement officer accompanied him, found a person, And when he asked that person, did you start that fire, the person responded in the affirmative and said, yes, I did. So that's part of his affidavit. That information has been handed to SAPS. The person was arrested, is in the custody of the South African police. A arson case has been opened against this person. The City Safety and Security Investigations Unit is supporting that investigation as best they can. And I see Sandparks has secured the services of a forensic fire investigator to look in this, because no doubt there are significant liability issues now at stake with the very substantial heritage assets that were lost, persons that were injured, and God forbid, potential risk to residential properties that may still come into play later today, depending on how the wind is blowing. The moment the wind is blowing, the fire around the back of the Pepper Pot Towers, so no immediate risk now, although some residents are still choosing to evacuate. But that might still become a risk for the top of Deer Park Drive and that portion of Vredehuk this afternoon. And disaster management will issue advisories if that becomes necessary, and will undertake further evacuations. We hope that will not be the case and that nobody else will be injured. The measure of a fire like this is the loss of life, and I can say that here we are blessed. We have had no loss of life. There certainly were opportunities. The evacuation of the student residents yesterday as a precautionary measure made sure that there wasn't risk there, and luckily no other incidents so far. And then perhaps just as a slight detour, something that we don't ordinarily do, but I just feel to do now. When I left here last night, some of these staff were still here. Many of you have spoken on the phone to Jermaine Carlson. There he stands at the back. These are our unsung heroes, these staff who are always on duty. Jermaine is still here. He still looks fresh. But he has been here since yesterday morning, and my sincere appreciation for him. Others have now changed shift this morning, 9 o'clock, and gone home. New staff have started, but Jermaine and some of the acting fire chief, Mr. Manuel, and others are still on site since yesterday. There's Maxine at the back. She was also here yesterday. I don't know if you've gotten to go home. In the meantime, I got to go home last night. They didn't, so my sincere appreciation to them. Thank you. And then also just to the journalists. I see some of you with red eyes and stuff here. You've all been battered and wind and hammered by the winds. Some of you are suit covered. Got very close to the fire, evidently. Just an appreciation for the work you do. I know we don't often turn around and say thank you to you. So just for that. You will see this contraption outside. We have had for the last week the rare benefit of the private sector approaching us and saying we have a resource that we're testing. We want to test it operationally. This is a glider plane with a very strong, very large camera rig at the bottom that we are using to see if we can use it for metal theft operations, to detect people at night digging out our cable in places, or poaching operations and those kind of things, gang operations. So we've been testing it over the last few days, and because we had access to it, we've asked them to support us on this. The glider plane has been up the entire morning. It's a fixed wing, so it's not affected as the helicopters are. And they've been sending pictures through continuously to allow Arlene and others to have a proper situational awareness of the extent of the fire. Should you be interested afterwards in seeing how that works, they are available for you to go and record some footage there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman. Before we go for the tour to see the incident room, I would just like to do a round of questions. I'll do them 2 to 3 at a time. Please indicate if anybody specific you'd like to take your question. If not, whoever can speak to it best will answer. 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll take the next one.
I have several questions, please. Whoever's best placed to address it. One relates to what Maya said, this being one of the biggest or the largest such fires. City Hall, could you just give me a bit of context there? In the past decade, last 3 years, the biggest in terms of what is vegetation burnt, or in terms of damage to property? Just a bit of context there, please. For Commander Weir, certainly my understanding is that this is now the end of the so-called fire season, summer fire season. Is that correct? The beginning of the fire, my understanding was at the bottom of the slopes of Rhodes Memorial. There is a large batch of dried wood that has been parking over there for at least 2 years, if I remember correctly. Is that a factor in your guys' analysis? And then for Councillor JP, is it fair to say that the person that's been arrested is has been linked, or I mean, how do we figure out to the start of the UCT fire? We've got him for the later fires, but and about more than. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I think that's quite a lot. Let's deal with that first because you used up an entire quota.
Sorry.
Okay.
So maybe I'll lean first.
Okay. With regards to the fire being the largest, it's not really the largest as yet. But with regards to the damage, the historical buildings and damage to that, yes, it's been quite substantial.
I think in the context of that, every year, every second year or so, it's maybe every 3 years, but because of the increasing densification around the urban edge, fine on him, every few years we have one of these massive mountain conflagrations. It is unfortunately part of the scene. You have a large national park surrounded by residential and commercial and other properties all around it. That is a recipe for crisis. And as the densities have increased, as more people have built properties, more residences, and the homeless crisis on top of that with people sleeping in those green spaces, this means that we have regularly had those fires. This strip is a particularly problematic hotspot from Vredehoek through to Philip Kosana because of the regular vagrant fires that are caused there. We've had several of these very bad. I think last year we had a Vredehoek fire. Was it last year?
Yes, last year, March.
The year before? March. We had that very bad Vredehoek fire as well. So unfortunately, these are common. And so when people asked us, what do you think the fire's caused? When we said vagrants, we weren't being judgmental. It's just based on experience. That's very often the cause, and does appear to be the case here again. In terms of heritage assets, this is the most damaging fire by a long stretch. Other fires burn a lot of vegetation, but no other properties. The South Peninsula fire was damaging because it hit several large and expensive properties. So too the Somerset West or Helderberg one a few years ago that did equal amount of damage. Just for the record, what poor Arlene is not telling you is that while she is struggling with this fire, we have to have manage a second one at Steenbros Dam. So just for good measure, in case we weren't busy enough, we've been given a second one to handle.
And then also with regards to your question for the fire season, yes, our fire season normally ends off at end of April, but due to weather changes and things, it sometimes extends into May.
Can I just say, Maureen, is it fair to say that this is all about wind?
Yes.
When there is a major fire, when there's a fire, you don't assemble like this and speak about it because the fire is put out quickly. You see another black lot on the mountain, and you go, oh, look, there was a fire yesterday or so.
Yes.
This happens when we have strong wind, then that changes the whole dynamic. So fire season is as long as the wind keeps blowing.
Thank you.
Can I just ask the speakers to speak closer to the mic so that all the news agencies can catch it? I believe it was Romy to do with the arrest.
No, you still had one about the arrest. So on the arrest issue, no, there's no necessarily linkage between this individual and the original fire. That's not clear yet. What he did admit to was starting a fire, which he was found near. His comments to the arresting officer are somewhat confusing, and one wants to give the individual a fair chance at a fair due process in the terms of the criminal justice system, so I don't think it's fair to repeat his comments that are made in the affidavit. The investigating officer and SAPS will have to advise you on what is able to be shared with the public. But he did admit to having started that fire. Whether he or other persons were involved in the earlier fires, and whether he was one of the 3 people moving about as claimed by residents starting fire, that's unclear at this stage. He's in his 30s, and when he was asked for his address, he said, I sleep in the bush. And so we'll have to see what the cause, what the outcome of that is. Very sad to think that if the injuries plus all these damages, if that was malicious. Either way, all fires are caused by people. And again, I think this is an opportunity to appeal to the public to remember that if you're irresponsible with a fire, this is the consequences. All fires are started by people, and whether maliciously or accidentally, it has consequences.
Thanks, Dr. We'll move on to the next 2 questions. Monique and then
I just have one question for Jackie. Regarding the arrest, right? You said there were 3 suspects. One is 3 people making fire, 1 person arrested. What happened to the other 2?
Well, it's what happened to the other 3, because we don't know that this individual may have been one of the 3. Okay. When our staff got to the scene, that member of the public who found this person at the fire and alerted law enforcement. When law enforcement spoke to him, he was alone. There were no other people with him. So he may have no bearing to those 3 individuals as claimed by a whole slew of members of the public and on social media. Their comments on social media, they're in the public domain. You can see for yourself. So he may have nothing to do with that, but certainly he was at a fire immediately adjacent to it and acknowledged his role in that fire.
And just one more question. If this is to be a public affairs information, anybody who might know?
Absolutely. That's the default setting, so absolutely 021-480-7700, the Public Emergency Communication Centre. We did issue that in a statement as well this morning. So anybody with any information, please to report, and also any further incidents if you see something, because with the strong wind, it does mean that airborne embers start new fires. There were fires being started at the Glen. Last night, this fire was spotting even on Liesbeek Parkway. And one of the senior fire officers told me that we had an incident as far away as Plumstead, where some of these embers floated down and started a fire. So unfortunately, when you have the mountain behind it and the wind is blowing that hot air up there, these embers can travel quite a bit. So it is predictable that you may have little other fires started. If you look at the layout of UCT and how those fires were started, there's no linkage between the buildings. It didn't spread from one building to the other. Those were individual cases where these embers landed, had a convenient external fire source in the form of the ivy. What defines that area as being so beautiful, that part of UCT, sadly also supplied a fuel for the fire, and then of course most likely spread into the roof and then had all that paper inside to act as fuel. And thank goodness for UCT's fire safety measures that they had implemented that prevented that fire from spreading to other sections and contained the damage. So while there were terrible losses, it could in fact have been worse were it not for the fire safety measures they had in place.
Thanks, Alderman. Back move over to this side. 1 and then 2.
Mariska Botha from the SABC. I would just like to give clarity, an update on what is the status of the fire right now. Is it still out of control or is it contained as Mayor alluded to?
Thank you. Mr. Lieutenant of the eNCA, Mayor, last night it was too early to say exactly where the fire might fall and what its course might be. Is there any update in terms of those details? And if you could just expand a little bit on your visit to UCT today, what is the actual extent of damage to the property? Thanks. I'll take one more question. There's another. Good afternoon, Malta. Deputy Captain here. Any additional resources being brought online? We're hearing SANDF has got their resources on standby. Is there anything extra that you would need from other agents? Thanks, Deputy. Update on the fire.
Okay, with regards to the update on the fire, it is contained for now. We're just monitoring the wind situation, the weather, and if there is any changes, and I hope this answers your question as well with regards to resources, we will call in additional resources. Yes, we are aware that SANDF has resources on standby.
In fact, the Oryx helicopter did make a turn
this morning.
Yeah,
but due to the wind, I don't think it was possible for him to fly. Thank you. Yes. Containment means it's not spreading any further, but there is a possibility of flare-ups in the burnt areas. So the containment means no further spread at that moment.
That is wind direction dependent.
As I said, yes. Thank you.
I think the next question is for the Mayor.
I think the visit to UCT, the extent of the damage, in talking to the management of UCT earlier this morning, is they had their own investigating teams on scene. They called them in to assess the extent of the damage to their buildings, the library and the other 2, and all other damages. It's too early to predict, it's too early to say. Likewise for the City of Cape Town, likewise for UCT, the investigating teams needs to determine the extent of the damage, course of the damage. They will have to work very closely with the City of Cape Town and with other agencies such as SAPS. I'm not in a position to say what the extent of the damage is right now in monetary terms. I think you can understand that. All I can say to you, I took a number of pictures this morning and yesterday, and the extent of the damage is massive. In monetary terms, it seems massive. Management was of the opinion that the damage is profound, and that is where I want to leave it. I think within the next day or so, the picture might become much clearer, but I will, through the UCT Precinct R, as I've said earlier, after this press conference, I will have another talk to the management. I might receive much more, better, reliable information from them with regard to the extent. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just have another round of questions. I know there's been requests for the names of the officials, so I'll just write it on the board. Any other questions on file?
Find out regarding the air quality, how closely it has been monitored, and also has it been complaints in the province?
So the Disaster Management Centre has activated its disaster coordinating team, and part of the team is various line functions, also other stakeholders that can help fire services manage the incident and also give good advice to the residents. So part of this team is also environmental management, and they monitor the air quality in the city, and they did pick up on the monitor on the foreshore that it's quite high. So that's the reason also why we made the decision to encourage evacuation, especially the residents living in this area, in the Vredehok and Sonnebloem area, rather, to evacuate. And also part of our media release that went out early on, we also gave tips on what residents can do, especially those that has asthmatic conditions.
How many people are you guys helping with the evacuation? How many have voluntarily left, and how many are you assisting? If you can, are there dozens, scores? I know that the Dyser Towers are 3 fairly large residential complexes. I mean, how many people are we talking about?
So it is our staff and volunteers. So currently on the ground we have 20 volunteers that are assisting the disaster management staff. So overall we can say there's about 30 staff members.
Oh no, forgive me, I'm not being very clear. How many residents have been evacuated that you guys are assisting?
Okay, so at this stage we don't have an actual number of the residents, but we have evacuated those areas, but I don't have the actual numbers of residents that did evacuate.
I can't say dozens, maybe.
No, I can't say dozens, but people did evacuate.
Sorry?
So most people in the
Would you be
area.
able to post an update or an estimate? Soundtracks are good. Would you be able to post an estimate on our media group just afterwards, or ask your guys and just get a rough estimate, so that, because this is a question quite a lot of the media have asked me this morning.
Yes. Okay, so at this stage it's very difficult to actually, in a situation like this, people just evacuate and we assist with that evacuation. So there's no one taking actually numbers, but I will try my best to get the feedback for you. Okay.
If there's no other questions, I will open the eNCA.
Sorry, I know you're not weather forecasters, but what are the reports that you're receiving in terms of the wind dying down and a change perhaps in the conditions you are experiencing at present?
So we work very closely with the South African Weather Services, and they did advise the Disaster Management Centre that we still will experience windy conditions for today. The southeaster will be blowing, so that is one of the information that we feed through the disaster coordinating team, and we also advise the city's fire services on the windy conditions. And it's done on a hourly basis, so we're in contact all the time with the South African Weather Service. They haven't advised us about tomorrow, but for today it is the southeaster blowing with very strong windy conditions.
Forecast, if you look at Windfinder, you will see that the wind speed around here is around 5, 6, 7 kilometers an hour faster than the airport. or stronger than the airport, has been gusting upwards of 45 kilometers an hour here. So understandably, even the Oryx helicopter this morning, when it tried to land, I don't know whether it was attempting to land, but came very low and then aborted. So even it was having difficulty, and then the single prop choppers are out of the question. And that is forecast to carry on until quite late this afternoon. I have just WhatsApped you that forecast, and that is forecast to stay quite strong until about 5 o'clock. So forecast for the helicopters doesn't agree.
Okay, that, if there is a little bit of time, so if there's any more questions, you have an opportunity. Thanks. I will.
Sorry, I just want to double check the spelling of Incident Commander Wilson and W-E-H-R.
W-E-H-R.
Thank you.
So if you want, you can go and see on the other room at the jockey on the other side. That's where Arlene has been holding court with all the services, obviously an integrated service approach with traffic, law enforcement, metro police, all of them coordinating their respective functions. Thank you. Thank you everybody for attending, very much appreciated. To the councillors, thank you also.
That is the end of that briefing by the Cape Town Fire and Rescue Services, and we saw as well Dan Plato, the Mayor of Cape Town, and JP Smith, who's the MMC for Safety and Security, and the Head of Operations Fire and Rescue Service, Arlene Ver, was also there. A key takeouts very quickly before we take a short break here on the Midday View at this hour is that at this stage there's been no loss of life due to the fire. Thankfully, that was stressed by J.P. Smith. There's been one man arrested, but it's not clear yet if the person who's been arrested is linked to the origin of this fire, but he was caught after some residents saw him starting a fire elsewhere. It is said to be in his 30s. He told the police that he sleeps in the bush, so we will have to wait for more details on that. There are also no details yet as to how many people have been evacuated from different parts of that area in Cape Town that's been affected by this fire, which has been described as the most damaging fire in terms of heritage buildings. We know, of course, of that main building that's been damaged at the University of Cape Town. The fire has been contained for now. That is, it's not spreading, but there are concerns it could flare up because of the strong winds. They are monitoring that. And finally, the South African National Defence has made its air resources available and on standby to be used once the wind dies down, as the efforts will continue to put out this fire.